Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, my beautiful sister, Abbie Tait. She was just recently on and she spoke at the end about how she wanted to talk about spirituality and how that can look different ways and just some questions that she had. And at the end of our episode, after we stopped recording, I just realized, no, this is too important to put off. So we are actually continuing on that same day, but we're going to air it later. So you'll hear it who knows how long after that initial conversation. But this is just going to be an organic conversation about what spirituality and faith can look like. And if you are struggling with faith, if you're struggling with understanding some questions, or maybe you're having some doubts, whether it's in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, maybe you're of my faith, maybe you're of another faith, the lesson is very similar. And I've had a lot of clients that have had many questions that are the same. So I'm really grateful that Abbie is on today to speak to that, because Abbie, I'll have you share your own experience with this, but she shared in the last episode that she grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but had been inactive, you said, for about 6 to 8 years. Is that right?
I would say, yeah, between 6 and 7 years, I think.
And she just shared that recently she's been going back to church. And I actually didn't know much about this. She hasn't shared a lot about that, but I've also tried to give her space, because I think I overcorrected in the past where I could be too overbearing, or maybe trying to take the reins a little bit instead of respecting your faith journey. And so it is always this balance. And so Abbie's sharing some thoughts and feelings about that. So if you are in that particular situation, tune in, listen up, because this may help you. So that being said, Abbie, we just briefly talked before I started recording. Can you share some of what you just told me about what you're experiencing right now?
Yeah, sure. In the trenches of my healing work, it's truly been excruciating. I am not exaggerating when I say I feel like I was dying. It was such a deep pain, different from physical pain, but I felt it physically in my entire being, my entire body, that I felt absolutely desperate for some sort of peace and comfort. And historically, I was seeking it in all the wrong places, like my abusive partner. And so I needed to try something different. And I wanted to be open-minded and willing to just kind of trust different things that could potentially help. One night, I asked a friend if I could attend an AA meeting with them, because I was like, you know what? I should treat this abusive relationship just like an addiction. Maybe this could be helpful. I attended it. I thought it was very enlightening. I'm glad that I went, but it wasn't super relatable. That evening, I had already committed to go to church the next day. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a commitment to myself right now. I'm going to go to church. I'm just going to try it out. My anxiety was crippling at this point, to the point that I was shaking almost 24/7. I was having nightmares. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was dropping weight. The anxiety was very bad. And I was desperate for some relief. So I was like, I'm going to try going to church and see if I get any sort of break from my anxiety. The next morning, I got up and I got ready, and I went to a church building and I walked in and it was empty. Nobody was there. And I was confused. Then I found out that they had a conference. They were at a different location. It wasn't normal hours. For a moment, I was like, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe this was a bad idea. But I was like, no, I've already committed to this. I'm just doing it. I arrived late at a mid-singles ward, and I walked in and I sat through it, and I noticed that my anxiety was calm. Like, I wasn't shaking. I actually felt pretty good. I was listening to the talks, and they were entertaining, to say the least. It was because it was a mid-singles, and it was entertaining, and it was fast and testimony week. Also, I was surprised at how I actually had this pull to go up myself, and I was like, what is this? Like, why would I go up there? Because what would I say? In my head, I was like, why would I even go up there? Because truly, I would probably make everyone uncomfortable, because what I would say is, I don't know anything. I can't stand here and say, I know the church is true because I certainly do not. And all I know right now is that it feels good to be around people who have integrity and they're trying to do better. And I feel like that's what I can say is right now I am trying to, one, pay attention to my body and what it's telling me. And two, surround myself just with people who have good character and integrity and are trying. And so I can be on board with that aspect of the church. Like the community is great. And there is a feeling of coming home a little bit in the sense that's what I grew up with. That's what I knew. I was all in on the church for 32 years. So there is a comfort there, but also then battling this feeling of, but there are certain things I don't agree with. And do I really belong here?
I do feel like this is very much spirit led, because everything you've said last episode and this episode has very much aligned with what I've been feeling. And just yesterday, Joel, my husband, encouraged me to do a podcast episode on my faith journey. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that, because not all of my listeners are Latter-day Saints. And I like that because I want it to be a safe space where they can hear things with maybe a more open heart if it was specifically addressed to just church members, because I truly value any faith out there that promotes healing, a moral compass, having integrity, having those characteristics, those values that allow people to become their better self, their best self, reach their potential. I absolutely value those. Even if that means going to another faith, like I think there's beauty in all those spaces. So that being said, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but as you're talking, I felt this need to share the messy parts, because there was something, and I don't even know that I've shared this much with you, but when all of our family members like left the church, or like in my mind, like you had left, I didn't know that you'd ever come back. All the family members left the church except for our mom. And then my best friends all left. I've been hesitant to share all of the details, but very rejected because of my beliefs, and just totally devastating. Like it still hurts so much. Just like a level of loneliness that I had never experienced with all of my siblings and friends that were close to me leaving, and having to navigate faith in a way that I never had before. And suddenly, things that didn't resonate before did. I felt the gray spaces more, like this unknown that wasn't so black and white, and that I didn't have all the answers, and I could have some doubts and I could have questions, and there was space for that. But nobody was like a mentor to show me how to navigate that. So it was very confusing. It was very lonely. And I felt a lot of times like I was living a completely different faith than so many people around me. But I also felt like I had so much more compassion for myself and for others, like your story or my clients that are going through these challenges. The faith that I hold to is a faith that makes room for that. There can be all sorts of people that come in, and you don't have to look a certain way or act a certain way. We all hope that there's like some sort of moral code, right? But that there's space for you to be a mess. There's space for you to be confused and doubt. And when I allowed that to happen, that's when my faith suddenly became deeper and richer and more secure, when I could let go of it having to look like this or having to look like this. And sorry, I just hijacked it a little bit from you, but that's what I hear you saying a little bit with the maybe outside. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I just love how you said that you didn't know, but it felt good to be around people who have integrity and are trying to do better. Like if somebody were to get up in church and say that, I would just be like, want to clap, because I like how vulnerable and open and genuine is that? And when people feel that way, knowing that it's okay to not have it to be solid and there's space for you.
I completely agree with everything that you said, and I don't feel like you were putting words in my mouth or anything like that. Yeah, I think I would feel the same way. Honestly, got up and said that. I think we get really used to the things that are typically said, and I know they have their place, and I get that. But also, then it can tend to feel very robotic and you lose the humanity a little bit in it. It's been just really interesting because I am trying to be open to dating, even though I absolutely don't feel ready for it. I'm deep in the grieving process. Yet I decided that maybe it would feel slightly safer to me to try to go on dates with LDS men. Is it okay if I say LDS? One of the things that surprised me about attending this ward was everyone was very kind. And I quickly realized that they were all a lot more like me than I had thought. Again, I get sucked into this trap over and over, and I'm sure we all do, of believing we are somehow so unique in the sense that we're the only ones feeling this way, or we're the only ones that are experiencing X, Y, and Z. And it's just not true. And I get reminders of that all the time. And this was just another one. But all these people I was meeting, they were divorced or they had all these experiences that had really challenged them or torn them down. And they were essentially doing the same thing, like going to church, trying to seek comfort. But there's such a mixed bag of people showing up at church. And I think it's easy to assume that only the good ones are showing up for church or whatever that even means. And I just anticipated that I was going to be like this black sheep showing up at church. And it just wasn't the case.
It just reminds me of the Bible. I think we all have to be like the Pharisees that are like really rigid. And I'm not ridiculing exact obedience. Like I think there's a lot of power that comes from obedience and having a strong moral code or compass. And yet the person that keeps coming back with that humility and the desire to find that peace and that comfort, whatever that looks like, the fact that they keep coming back, I love those people. Sacred and holy. And I would love to make that my mission, to work with people that are just so vulnerable and open and willing to be judged, willing to be misunderstood, that are willing to keep showing up. And I've had a lot of clients like that lately. And I think that's the overall message I want. There's space for all of us. And I think we need to be way more open, those of us that are in the church, no matter the faith, if we are the ones that are like, think that we have it all together, to remember that we have a lot to learn from those people. Thanks for
Yeah, I agree. I find myself inspired the most by the people who have the roughest story. They seem to just have so much compassion and love. And in a lot of ways, they end up feeling like the most Christ-like to me. I still have no idea what I believe. But the exciting part is I need to give myself permission to figure that out on my own, in my own time, and to trust myself along the way, to sit with different concepts or different ideas and let that sit in my body and decide how that feels. I think that there are a lot of great concepts in the church and the lifestyle. So I've had to focus on things I can say and support with confidence. They, as in anyone who belongs to within organized religion, typically they tend to encourage a healthier lifestyle. And those are things that I can really be on board with. And I think when I was thinking about dating and in general feeling very mistrusting and afraid of men, our other sister had made an off comment once about how she was like, maybe you'd feel better dating an LDS guy. When she first said it, I was like, what? Like, why would you say that? But it really stuck in my head and I kept thinking about it. And so fast forward to now, and I have been attending church, my pace just continuing to go, but I'm also continuing to trust myself in each moment, each day, based off of how I feel in that. I don't know what that means for me in the future, but I can say for now, my anxiety is more calm. I'm finding comfort and peace in it now, surrounding myself with people who are a lot more similar to me than I had originally thought they would be. And I think the reason I really wanted to have this conversation with you is I wanted to know what it looked like for people who want this nuanced version of being a member without maybe being all in. Honestly, I don't even love the word member. I don't technically, I guess you'd say on the records of the church, I never had my name removed or anything. But I don't want to feel like it's this like membership that I signed up for. I just want to feel like I am I'm going because it feels good and it feels right now. And I'm just trying to better myself. And it's nice to be around other people who are doing the same thing. And it also is nice to like that they know that the depths of being raised in the church and how deeply that runs. And so navigating the dating world has been fascinating and talking to all the different people because I thought some of these guys are like what I would consider very LDS. And I did not think they would have any interest in me because I haven't held back any part of myself. And I'm just trying to show up as I am, even if that comes across as the black sheep. I have a nose ring, I have tattoos, and I thought that would scare people off. It's been actually really interesting to have. I've had a lot of really good, insightful conversations with people.
I really appreciate some of these things that you brought up. And one of them, I just briefly want to mention that I never thought about before, like how member or non-member, like there's not really an in-between space and it feels like a club that like you're either in or you're out. Maybe changing that verbiage potentially at some point. But again, making space for those in-between spaces, whether it's just you individually or collectively trying to change that narrative a little bit. But I wanted to speak to a couple points that I was thinking about as you were talking. Like with my clients, I feel like it constantly goes back to assertiveness and boundaries. And I think this could look for you or for others like a simple conversation. Hey, I am doing a lot of inner work right now. I'm on this new journey. I don't know what that looks like when it comes to next steps. I just know that I want to show up, at least for now, to find that peace and that comfort. And I want to be very clear about what I'm okay with and what I'm not. I know first and foremost that missionaries, for example, can be a little pushy sometimes, or maybe certain members, maybe the bishopric of any faith, there are going to be some that don't hear you or your boundaries. And yet that's something that we can change as far as individually even advocating for ourselves. Like, I want to keep showing up, and I would feel most comfortable doing that if you could make space for that and hear me when I say, this is what I'm comfortable with and this is what I'm not right now. I'm okay with you checking in with me, and that might change soon, but I need to know that how I'm showing up right now is okay and that I can feel safe continuing to come because you're honoring and respecting my boundaries. And now that's not a conversation we have in the church very much in this way, but I just thought about it when I'm always talking with my clients about how we can advocate for ourselves and set boundaries. Like, why not also, as I was going to say, an investigator or member, but if we're not calling it that, I don't know what to call it yet. But as somebody that's coming, seeking that peace and that comfort. And again, like going back to some clients that I've just recently met with, they felt like there's not a space for them in church if they don't have a solid testimony, if they have doubts, if they are not even really sure what their values are or their moral compass. But I think that those conversations are going to start happening more and more in the church as people want to find that peace and that comfort, but they don't know what level of commitment maybe they are yet.
And I think so far in my limited experience of doing this, I'm realizing there's an unhealthy amount of people that are just comfortable with secrets, I guess is the best way to say it. It's people are secretly struggling rather than just being who they are and being honest with themselves and the people around them and not being afraid of what that looks like. I think that's been the biggest takeaways. I'm like, a lot of these people are just like me. They're just afraid to say it, or you can sense that a lot of these guys, even that I've gone on dates with, you can sense that they're feeling out how I feel about the church first before they're willing to say where they stand on it. Because you can tell they're afraid of being like rejected of, oh, like how in is this girl? Is she going to think if I drink coffee, is she going to stop talking to me? You can feel that. And the biggest feedback I've gotten from people is, wow, you're so easy to talk to. You're so accepting. I feel like I can just be myself. And I feel like everyone should be able to feel that way all the time. I think where I struggle is I'm like, where do I really fit? Because I feel like the church is set up in a way that is, even if you're not in now, that's okay. But the expectation is that you eventually will be. And where can I sit in that if I don't What if I don't want that? Or what if I don't know? And I like the way you said about the boundaries, because that is very eloquently put, but the way you stated it was very well said. And I do feel confident enough that if I was called into the bishop's office or something, I do feel like I'm in a stage where I could say that. And I think that's a good invitation for leaders of the church to accept that too. But also, we won't get into, I naturally go into other people's perspective all the time. So that puts them in a hard position. How do they fill these roles if everybody's like me? But it's not my job to consider all of that. It's my job to consider my boundaries and where I'm at.
I think it's very easy for us, especially when we're initially, I call it the teenager stage, sometimes when you're questioning your faith, because I totally did it too, when I was more critical and angry. And I think that's like a normal stage to talk about stages of faith development. Those things definitely happen, and that's can be normal and appropriate and totally fine. We don't have to lose our mind. As members of the church, often we get very uncomfortable if somebody starts to talk about their doubts or their questions and think they're trying to pull us away. And how dare they? And we get like self-righteous and triggered. Done a lot more work. I do not have that happen as much anymore. But I think we also talk about sometimes the culture of the church needs to change, and we get really uppity about it. Well, again, because I think I made space for myself to be, I finally stopped worrying about people pleasing or appearing a certain way. And I started to live my faith the way that felt authentic to me. And at first that might have been more teenager. I'm going to do this if I want to. I'm going to wear these running shorts, and I've started to feel a little bit like rebellious, but I think it was still healthy for me to do it and understand I need to figure this out for myself instead of just doing it because somebody told me to, and I need to gain my own conviction of things. Anyway, I eventually stopped being so bent out of shape about the culture, and I realized that if there's something that I want to change, I can't control everybody else, but I can control my own space. And I shared this with you just briefly before we went on, but I want to share it again for the sake of listeners because I think it will help others struggling. I don't know if this is true, but the message is the same. I wanted to share in the calling that I was in, it was somewhat of a leadership calling. Well, I guess I'll just say it. I was the Young Women's President, and I wanted it to be very clear because of my work as a therapist and working with people that it was okay if the youth, because I'd talked to so many of them, it's okay if they have questions. It's okay if they have doubts. It's okay if they don't know with absolute certainty about their testimony. They're still welcome, and there's still space for them in the church. I truly believe God loves them in their journey throughout all of that. And I wanted to normalize that for them so they didn't feel so alienated. They didn't feel like misfits, because I remember feeling like a misfit. I remember feeling like there was only one or the other in the church, especially in your teenage mind when it's so black and white. But when I tried to shift that culture, I don't think they knew what to do with it. And I think they thought that like I was not a safe spiritual person potentially for those youths, even though I was trying to be very respectful. Now, I could be completely wrong. I did ask them very directly if that was true, and they said no, but I don't know that I totally believe that. Who knows? The point of the story is I was released from that calling, and it still hurts a little bit because my aim is never to harm people ever. And I don't feel that I did. Maybe I did and I don't know it, but I don't think so. But I think all we can do is to be honest and seek to help and heal and lift. And I truly believe that in my desire to do that, to normalize some of these things, was only to help people feel closer to Christ and to feel like there's a safe place for them. You can't control others, and maybe having that conversation where you set boundaries or things like that too. But I think the most that we can do right now is maybe it won't change on a large scale very quickly, but yet there are things that we can do to change our culture around us, even if other people don't understand. You talked about potentially getting up and saying something in testimony meeting. I had a client recently that was saying, I had these thoughts about something somebody was saying, and I was like, I personally would be so grateful if somebody would respectfully, always respectfully, raise their hand in Relief Society or something and just say, this is something that I feel and that I have learned, or sometimes that's hard for me to accept, or in a loving way, another perspective. So it doesn't feel like you have to show up this certain way and you have to answer this certain way, so that we can have a more genuine and authentic culture sometimes that is not too uncomfortable talking about secrets. Not that they have to share all their dirty laundry, but not afraid to just be messy and human. You know what I mean?
In my experience, like with my ex, I really believe that when he, at a fairly young age, when he wasn't so sure if he believed in the church or wanted to be a part of the church, but all of his family was, that he just started a pattern of, oh, if I just do what I'm supposed to in front of everyone, and then I lie about it, and that way I can still explore my curiosities and I can still do whatever I want, as long as I lie to the other people and they don't know about it. That started at a very young age, and that continued on for the rest of his life. And I think that probably is pretty common, especially in very religious families or within organized religion, where people feel so much shame around being human that they try to conceal those parts of themselves. And that is going to be like a healthy state of being. Like it's not. And so encouraging more of an environment where honesty can exist safely. I'm not saying that they should embrace all the darkest parts of themselves. I'm just saying that they shouldn't be in a position of trying to pretend. And that's not healthy for anyone. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for the people they're interacting with. It's just not a healthy state of being. And I think when you say trying to make a small impact in the way that we show up for people and the compassion we show and like trying to be less judgmental, but I really think it ultimately does start with ourselves too. So like even when you're talking about how you used to be more like defensive if someone, like anytime that little bit of like discomfort comes up, or you notice that, at least for myself, I notice when I have a strong emotional response, or if it wakes up something in me, that's my number one indicator of a light bulb goes off of, whoa, what was that? And obviously that's something I have work to do around. And so I think if we're focusing on ourselves of, whoa, that really triggered something in me. And if we approached ourselves with more curiosity, imagine going into a ward or any religious building, or even just work, in any situation, if you were surrounded by people who questioned their own triggers rather than projecting it onto someone else. Imagine how those conversations would go.
Really appreciate you bringing that up. And that is so important. I've shared it on the podcast. I don't know if I've shared it with you, but when you get reactive, get curious. You have a wound that is waiting to be healed. And that's essentially like what you're saying. It's just to have that curiosity instead of shutting down, instead of judging others, and wherever it can go. That's so beautiful. And to create that space where honesty can exist without pretending. We can keep pointing fingers at an institution, a religion, or whatever, that, oh, they need to do this better. But really, we can only control ourselves. And we know that. Like, there's many faiths out there. And I will say, I am personally all in, and yet my faith looks very different than it ever did before. But I will say, in all of my clients that I've ever seen, the happiest people I've ever seen, my favorite mentors, the people I pattern my life after, have a moral compass. And wherever you're getting your moral compass, that's your own journey. But I think we try to find that peace and that comfort in other places. And without something structured, often it's very hard to maintain that peace and that comfort in our life. Now, this is not like you have to do this, you have to do this, but that is what I've seen with my clients time and again. Tell me about that, how that's been for you, like finding that again. It sounds like you have tried to go to church. You've gone the last 4 weeks. Have you continued to feel that, or what does that look like for you? And how do you find it outside of church?
Yeah, I would say that like this last Sunday, I didn't necessarily feel as connected to it. And there were moments where I was like, oh, yeah, reminders of why I'm not so sure I'm on board. But that, again, if I'm focusing in general on like the people, like I feel good about the people I'm surrounding myself with and good about the way I'm spending my time. And actually, our other sister joined me. And that was the surprising part. And honestly, what I really took away from that was that it was a bonding experience with my sister. that I felt closer to her. And really, we were both choosing to go into this uncomfortable situation together and just feeling connected. I think all this work that I'm doing is already attracting different types of people. I have just been living by my own rules in the sense of paying attention to, okay, I love coffee and I'm probably always going to love coffee. And I am not cutting it out for any religious reason. I still do drink it, but I've cut back a lot because I noticed that my anxiety was maybe a little bit worse. So then I was like, okay, I'm just going to drink decaf. So I've been drinking decaf coffee when I really want it. And I've been having a lot more herbal tea because it just feels good to drink and it calms my anxiety a little bit. And I've made commitments to myself and how I'm going to show up on dates or things I'm going to be okay with and things I'm not going to be okay with. And so I'm structuring myself in the same way, but according to what feels good to me. And that feels empowering, but also feels like I'm carrying that peace with me as well. And I'm being intentional about who I'm spending my time with. And they're very quality people that I just feel good around, that my body tells me, yeah, this is safe.
I am so grateful we decided to do the second episode and that you asked to speak to it. You're very in tune with what I've been feeling and what I think a lot of people need to hear. I'm very grateful for the things that you're saying. And it reminded me the last things that you were talking about, almost like the relationship of a parent. And it actually goes in really well with what you said the last episode about your belief that if you weren't a burden, or just some of those initial beliefs that have caused you to go down different routes potentially. But I think about parents and how all we want from them is to feel that unconditional love. We want to feel that if we mess up, they tell us not to go drinking, we drank, or maybe we slept around, or whatever it is, whatever the thing was that we did that we're feeling a lot of guilt and shame for. Or maybe it's older in life and you had an affair. Ultimately, you just want to feel that you are loved, even in those spaces that you messed up, but that love doesn't go away. And I think everything that we're talking about is we want to feel that in our teenage rebellious self stage or in our seeking to understand who we are, find out who we are authentically without just being told and just being obedient. While there's some beauty in that, being able to discover for ourselves what resonates and what feels right. And then I'm going to apply it to Christ here. I'm not entirely sure where your beliefs are at the moment, but I want to believe personally that if I come before Christ, that it is so unconditional and that he will love me so deeply, despite my mishaps, and in that sacred space, that I will be loved and accepted, and he'll teach me a higher way while making space for me to decide for myself and loving me regardless of how long it takes me to come to those conclusions myself or learn that myself. And I think that's what I hear what you're saying. That's what I want in the church or in any church, is that there's unconditional love. I can show up in any form and that it's still okay. And this is a church for people that need a physician, which is every one of us. And we are all going to be on a very different journey. And that is so okay. And we can have those hard conversations and we don't have to get so bent out of shape when somebody else's journey looks so different than our own. Any thoughts on that?
I think that if we all lead with more compassion and love, which I know may seem kind of cliche because we hear it all the time, but it's so true. If that's what we're choosing to lead with, I don't think it's ever the wrong choice. I don't know what I believe right now. And it's a little bit exciting to figure out what that's going to look like. I don't even know what that will look like tomorrow. But I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And for now, one of the most comforting things for me, and I touched on this before, is imagining the most pure, wise version of myself. that's untainted by wounds and by experiences. And I would say that's right now how I visualize God. And if God is part of all of us, knows us perfectly, to me, in my brain, it makes sense that who knows me more perfectly than me? And what if there is this absolutely pure version of me that I can visualize guiding me and loving me truly unconditionally? That feels so good to me. And when it comes to spirituality and beliefs, I think a lot of us are saying and expressing the same things in different ways. We're using different language. And I think there's a place for all of us. And the hope is that everyone can just put down their defenses a little bit and choose not to be threatened and just embrace each other and the differences.
I love that. And I think that's a great space to end. Choose not to be threatened and embrace the differences. Such a tall order and such a noble, beautiful thing. And again, I think about the life of the Savior. Embrace the differences. That is exactly what he did. And I love studying him because he was the master at embracing so many different people, so many different cultures, the tainted, the just rejected, all of those people, and living that higher, holier way, whatever that looks like. I have a client, he's not of the same faith, and he's just like, Kendra, everything we've done in session, and he got all emotional. He's the most transformational parts. It hasn't been self-care, even though that's been amazing. It hasn't been even working on these different mental health aspects, but it's been spirituality and healing in that way, and learning more about that part of it for myself. It has been game changing. And I'm reminded, I first went into personal training because I wanted to help people heal their bodies. And then I went into mental health because I wanted to help them heal their minds. And I love the spiritual part too. So apparently I just want to be a healer. But I love that, like, no matter what faith we are, like, there's space to just be compassionate and embrace people wherever they're at. And I love that you share that. And I so very much appreciate this about you, Abbie, your willingness to show up vulnerably and have those hard conversations and speak candidly about it in ways that people don't. And I have a feeling that's why I'll just keep begging you to come on the show. So thank you very much.
Great. I'm here for it.
But we should do round 3. So we've already done 2.
Let's just keep.
But any final last words that you have for listeners today when it comes to spirituality?
Honestly, I don't. I feel good about everything I said, and I don't feel called to say anything more.
All right. Thank you again. And we'll have you on soon. Maybe tomorrow.
Okay. I love you so much.
I love you. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like. I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.